Hi, I'm Kerry Goulder from Kid Giddy, and I'm here today to show you how to make the bear using my Sizzix dies. First, you're going to need some wool felt fabric, which is what I have here. You'll need some turning tubes, a stuffing fork, a little bit of washable glue, and some additional fabric colors or wool felt colors for things like the bow tie or the stars, anything like that. You'll also need some clipping shears, some embroidery floss, and a doll needle for the eyes. If you don't want to do embroidery eyes, you can use safety eyes. If this is for a child, safety eyes are a good choice, as well as the embroidery floss, so it's really up to you. You'll need some pins and some stuffing. So when you're cutting out your bear pieces, if you're using quilter's cotton, you will want to make sure that you place the fabric correctly on the die so that the stretch matches what's in the instructions. When you're using wool felt, it doesn't really matter. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I like to use wool felt. So we're going to need quite a few pieces of each one, but in some of them we're only going to need one or two. So for the front of the body we need two. For the back of the body you need two. The sides of the face or the cheek you'll need two. And the center part of the face, you'll only need one. The back of the head, you'll need two. The top legs or the arms, you'll need four. The bottom legs, you'll need four. And then you'll need 6 pieces for this little ear shape, which is also your tail. So you'll need 2 sets for the ears and you'll need a set for the tail. So I'm going to start by placing 2 layers of the wool felt on top of my die. Then I'll go back and I'll add little pieces wherever I need extra pieces. So this die cut works in the Big Shot Plus machine, which is what I have here, and it will also work in your Big Shot Pro machine. It will not fit with the Fabby. So we're just going to slide that top right off. We're going to take all of our little pieces out. Now I have all my pieces of the bear cut out, and I have a couple extra pieces cut out as well. Because I put one whole panel of fabric on the die, these little extra pieces were cut out at the same time. So I have some bow ties, some hearts, little baby rattles, and little stars. Can you imagine cutting these out by hand? It's very painful. So it's a lot better using your Sizzix die cut, and these get cut out for you. Save these for another project and keep them aside. To start sewing your bear, you want to sew the 2 legs, the 2 ears, and the tail. You do not want to sew the arms yet. The arms will be sewn a different way than the legs. So let's just get started sewing these pieces. Sometimes wool felt has a good side and a bad side. So you want to make sure that you take a look at it and you're sewing on the side that you don't want to see most often. We're using a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. And as you go around the curves, with wool felt, it's a lot easier to just guide your fabric around a curve and then guide it the other way around an inside curve. So here I'm just pushing the fabric and I'm pulling it one way and pushing it another just to go around these curves. And then I'll pick up my lever whenever I need to pivot the fabric even more. Now I'm going through the inside curve and I'm just going to push it the other way. Make sure you lock in your stitches at the beginning and the end. Once you finish sewing the 2 legs, the 2 ears, and the tail, you want to clip and notch them. The inside curve is a clip, so it's just a very simple straight line clip, about every 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit less than a 1/4. But when you get to an outside curve, you want to put a notch in there. So I like to go one side, and now I'm going to go back the other side. Now I have this little triangle. It's not as important to do this for wool felt, although I do it. I think it gives a great result. It's very important to do it with quilter's cotton. Once you finish clipping and notching your legs and the 2 ears and the tail, you want to turn them right side out. So to do that, you just use one of the turning tubes and you just push it right through. It's a little harder with wool felt, so you want to be careful not to push a hole in it. So just be gentle. As soon as you can grab it, go ahead and grab it right off and pull it. And so now we're going to take the stick and we're just going to rub it right along the seam allowance just to push it out. Now we're going to put together the front of the bear's face. To do that, you'll need the 2 cheek pieces and you'll need the center forehead piece. We're going to start by taking the center forehead piece and flipping it right over on top of one of the cheek pieces. Now you're going to sew from the nose up to the top of the cheek and the forehead piece. Again, you want to make sure that you lock in your stitches so that things don't come undone as you're putting it all together. Now we have one cheek piece connected to the forehead, and we are going to connect the other cheek piece to the other side of the forehead. So you just want to flip the cheek piece over on top of the forehead. Here we have the front of the bear's face, but we need to connect this bottom seam, which is really under the chin. So fold those 2 cheek pieces back together again so you can see the forehead is just going to get folded in half, and you're going to stitch under this little neck piece up to the nose. Once the center seam from the nose down to the neck is connected, you'll notice that you have a little hole right here in the nose. That's okay. That's the way it should be. What you do now is you place it down on the forehead and you press open this little seam. You want to push aside the cheek pieces. It'll make it a little easier for you to open that seam. Press it down. Make sure it's even on both sides. And now you're going to stitch straight across using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This will help give the bear a really cute nose. Now we have the front of the bear face finished. Here's the right side, which will end up being pushed out like that. And now we're going to put together the back of the bear head. Here's the back of the bear head, and here's the front of the bear head. When you put them together later on, you'll notice that these 2 notches line up perfectly on both sides. So this is your little indicator to make sure you don't sew the wrong seam. We'll put those aside. Now we're going to sew the back of the bear's body. This does not have a notch in it, but you can clearly see that these 2 sides are very different. This is the side that's going to attach to the front of the body, and this is the side that he's going to sit on. So this is his back side. We're going to sew from the top to about middle point, leave a space, and then we're going to sew to the bottom. We need to put in our tail though. We're going to pin the tail to this largest curve on the back of this piece. When you're sewing the 2 sides together, you'll want to stitch just above that tail so the tail stays secured. Leave your opening a little further up and away from the tail so that the tail doesn't get pulled out and loosened up over time. When you're stitching this back side and the very bottom point, this little point here is going to match up to the front of the body. If you don't stitch it far enough down, it won't line up properly. So make sure that you place this in your machine and start your stitch really far down on that edge. When you get to the tail, make sure you double stitch over the tail, the beginning of it and the end of it, and even in between a couple of times, just to give it a lot of strength. It's also very thick, especially if you're using wool felt, so you want to make sure that you go really slow over the tail. You may have to push it through your machine as well. Just give it a nice little nudge. Now I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to leave my opening here and I'm going to stitch right up here all the way up to the back of the neck. Now we're going to sew up the front of the body and we're going to attach the arms. To attach the arms, it's going to be a little awkward. The arm does not have a curve the way the front of the body piece has a curve, but this is the armhole. So we're going to take the arm and we're going to place it and stitch it as we go along that curve. I'm going to place it in my machine and I'm going to line up these two pieces just like so. And then I'm going to move my fabric as I go along. It's easier if you work with your needle down so that your needle can hold your fabric in place and it doesn't move it. Again, I'm just pulling the arm over a little bit to follow the curve of the armhole on the body. So here I've stitched the arm to that part of the body. And so now the arm will actually lay forward a little bit when it's all finished. And now we're going to repeat that on the other side. Make sure when you start sewing the other side of the arm that you're actually sewing it opposite. If you don't sew it opposite, you'll have two pieces that look exactly the same and then they won't go together. Now we have both front sides of the bear and we're going to put those together. You want to make sure that your seam allowance is facing down, and when you put them together, one is facing up and the other is facing down. And we're going to stitch from the neck all the way down to the bottom point. Here's the front of the bear body, and now we need to attach the arms on the back side of the bear body. Because we did the legs differently than we're doing the arms, we need to make sure that the back side is lined up to the front side. So just temporarily, we're going to pin the top neck of the front and back together on both sides, and this will allow us to find exactly where we need to attach the arms to the back side. So your seam allowance is on the outside here, and we're going to flip the front of the arm down, and we're going to place the back of the arm down on the back side. Make sure that the arm curves upward so that when the bear is finished, his arms curve upward a little bit as opposed to curving downward. We'll pin the arms in place. When you're attaching the back side of the arm to the back of the body, the back of the arm is straight, whereas the back of the body has a little bit of a curve. So make sure that you move the corners around to follow the curve of the back piece. We're going to stitch both back sides of the arm in place. Now we have arms on both the front and the back side of the bear. And we have the front part of the head and the back part of the head. Now we're going to take the front head piece and attach it to the front body piece. You're just going to flip those pieces together and line up your center seams and line up your corners. If you've done your seam allowance 1/4 inch on both the front of the head and the front of the body, your edges and your seams will match up. Press your seams flat to reduce the bulk as you're stitching all the way across. Now we have the front side of the bear, and we're going to put together the back side of the bear. We're going to do the exact same thing. Flatten out your seams, line up your seams, and line up your edges.